Most nights, my job was uneventful. I worked as a bartender at a quiet lounge in a mid-sized city. The place wasn't exactly upscale, but we had a strict dress code, so it attracted a higher-end clientele, businessmen, couples on dates, and the occasional loner looking for a strong drink after a long day. I'd been working the night shift for 3 years and thought I had seen it all, until the night I realized that I was being hunted, and that if I had made one wrong decision, I might have never been seen again. It started on a Thursday night, just past midnight. The bar was half empty, the usual late-night regulars sipping whiskey or watching the muted television above the counter. That's when I noticed him, a man in a well-tailored suit, sitting alone at the far end of the bar. He was handsome but off. His suit looked expensive, yet his shoes were oddly scuffed, like he had been walking around for hours. He hadn't ordered anything, just sat there watching me work. Eventually I approached. "Can I get you something?" I asked. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Do you like your job?" The question caught me off guard. "Yeah," I said hesitantly. "Pays the bills." He nodded, still watching me intently. "Ever think about doing something bigger?" Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. I forced a polite smile. "I'm good here?" He didn't respond, just tilted his head slightly like he was studying me. Then without another word, he stood up and left. No drink, no tip, just walked out. A week later he came back, but this time he wasn't alone. A woman was with him, tall, elegant, with sleek black hair and piercing green eyes. She was dressed just as expensively as he was, wearing a dark red dress that clung to her frame. The moment she saw me, she smiled. "There she is," she purred, sliding onto a bar stool. Her voice was smooth, almost hypnotic. I hesitated, glancing at the man beside her. He said nothing, just leaned back in his chair, watching. The woman ordered a drink, a Negroni, and as I made it, she kept talking. "You're beautiful," she said casually. "You ever think about getting out of this place? Doing something exciting?" Déjà vu. I forced a laugh. "Not really." She stirred her drink slowly. "What if I told you I could triple your salary overnight?" I stopped mid-pour. She leaned in slightly. "I work for a very exclusive club, private members only, the kind of place where girls like you make real money. You'd fit in perfectly." My stomach tightened. "Not interested," I said, sliding her drink across the counter. She smiled again, but this time there was something cold in her expression. "Are you sure?" she murmured. "It's an invitation, not an offer." I kept my face neutral. "I'm sure." For a moment she just stared at me. Then she pulled a small white card from her clutch and placed it on the bar. "In case you change your mind." Then she and the man stood up and left. I didn't touch the card. That night I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. When I stepped outside for my break, I noticed a black SUV parked across the street. The windows were tinted, and I could feel eyes on me. For the next few nights, the car kept appearing, always parked across the street, never moving. By the fourth night, I was completely on edge. Then, just before closing, I saw her, the woman in the red dress. She was inside the bar, watching me. I froze. She didn't order anything, didn't speak, just smiled. Then outside, a black van pulled up, and the back doors swung open. My stomach dropped. 2 men in masks stepped out, heading toward the back entrance. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone. But before I could dial 911, my boss walked in. The moment he entered, the woman stood up and left. The men outside, they vanished into the darkness. The black van peeled away. I barely slept that night. The next day, I told my boss everything. He took me to the back office and pulled up the security footage from the night before. We fast-forwarded to the moment the van pulled up, and that's when we saw them. 3 more masked men were waiting just outside the camera's view, hiding near the alleyway. They had been waiting for me. We rewound the tape further to the week before, to the night the man in the suit first appeared, and that's when we noticed something that made my blood run cold. He hadn't just walked in, he had been standing outside the bar for over an hour, watching through the window. And worse, The black SUV had been parked across the street the entire time. I called the police. They took a report, but nothing happened. The SUV never returned. The man and woman never came back. It was like they had just vanished. But deep down, I knew the truth. Had been targeted if my boss hadn't shown up that night. If I had stepped outside, if I had gone to meet someone like they wanted me to, I might have never come back. A few weeks later, I moved. I changed my routine, stopped working night shifts. I tried to forget. Then, one morning, I found an envelope taped to my apartment door. Inside was a single white card. No name, no number, just 3 words, written in perfect cursive. You got lucky. People think human trafficking only happens in third world countries. They think it's just news stories and statistics. But the reality, it happens everywhere. And sometimes it starts with a friendly conversation at a bar. So the next time someone offers you a job that seems too good to be true, trust your instincts, because the people behind it, they already chose you. Working the night shift at a gas station isn't as bad as people think. It's boring, sure. Most of the time, I was just wiping down counters, watching security monitors, and serving the occasional trucker or drunk guy looking for a snack. But I never really felt unsafe. Not until that night. Not until I realized that for the first time in my life, I was being hunted. It was a Tuesday night, just past 2 a.m. The gas station was completely empty. No cars, no customers, just the distant of the coolers and the dull flicker of the old neon sign outside. I was behind the counter, scrolling through my phone, trying to stay awake. Then something moved in the corner of my eye. I glanced up at the security monitor. A man was standing near the gas pumps. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe he was stretching his legs, waiting for someone. But after a minute, something started to feel off. He wasn't pumping gas. He wasn't checking his phone. He was just standing there, facing the store, watching. A strange unease settled in my chest. I leaned forward and checked the other camera angles. That's when I noticed his car, a dark sedan, parked just outside the lights. It was angled toward the exit like he wanted a fast getaway, and then something made my stomach drop. There was movement behind the car, a second figure, crouched low, hiding. The doorbell chimed as the man stepped inside. Up close, he looked ordinary enough. Mid-40s, scruffy beard, faded jeans, but his eyes were all wrong. Too wide, too alert, like he was waiting for something. He walked up to the counter, smiling casually. "Hey man, my car broke down the road. Think you could help me out?" His voice was too friendly, forced. I glanced back at the monitor. The second figure was still outside, crouched behind the car, waiting. Something was very, very wrong. I forced a polite smile. "Yeah, sure, let me just grab my phone." I turned and pretended to reach under the counter, but instead of my phone, I pressed the silent panic button, the one that immediately calls the police. Most people, when they need help, get frustrated if you take too long. But this guy, he just smiled, like he knew exactly what I was doing. Like he was playing a game. Then, after a long, uncomfortable silence, he shrugged. "You know what? Don't worry about it. I'll figure it out." And just like that, he turned and walked out. No argument, no insistence, just calm. Too calm. I watched him step outside and walk straight to his car. Then, the moment he reached it, the second man behind the car bolted, a tall, thin figure dressed in black, sprinting toward the woods behind the station. My blood ran cold. The first man didn't chase after him, didn't call out. He just got into his car, started the engine, and drove away. Not fast, not like he was fleeing, just casually, like nothing had happened. I checked the cameras again. The second man was still out there, standing at the tree line, half hidden in the shadows, watching. He didn't move. Didn't run. He just stood there staring at the gas station, at me. A feeling of pure dread settled in my chest. I couldn't see his face, but somehow I knew he was smiling. 15 minutes later, red and blue lights flooded the parking lot. I told the officers everything, showed them the footage. One of them, a grizzled-looking guy in his 50s, frowned as he watched the screen. Then he sighed. "We've seen this before." I blinked. "What do you mean?" He exchanged a look with his partner. Then he turned back to me. "It's a setup," he said. "They pick gas stations with lone workers. One distracts you, the other sneaks in, through the back or under the counter. They either rob you or worse. A chill ran through me. I looked at the empty space behind the car on the monitor. If I had stepped outside, if I had looked away for even a second, would I have been dragged into the woods? A few days later, I got a call from the police. They had found the first man's car, abandoned miles away, deep in the woods. But the part that haunts me, they never found him or his accomplice. It was like they had just vanished. 2 weeks later, I came in for my shift and found something waiting for me. A single piece of paper taped to the front door. On it, written in thick black ink, were 3 words. You were lucky. People think working alone at night is no big deal. They think the worst thing that can happen is a bored shift or a rude customer. But I know the truth. There are people out there who hunt in the dark, and if you're not paying attention, you might be their next target. Most people think that working retail is just about bad customers, low pay and long shifts. But the truth is, when you work late at night in an almost empty store, you start to notice things. The strange people who stay just a little too long. The ones who always seem to be standing a few aisles away. The ones who never buy anything. I learned the hard way that some of them aren't just weird customers. Some of them are hunting. And that night, I almost became their prey. I worked the overnight shift at Walmart, restocking shelves and handling the few late-night customers who wandered in. It was usually quiet, just truckers, exhausted parents, and night shift workers. But on this particular night, around 1:45 a.m., I noticed something strange. A man was lingering near the electronics section. He wasn't shopping. He wasn't looking at anything. He was just standing there, watching. At first, I ignored him. Some customers just zone out. Maybe he was waiting for someone, but 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Every time I glanced over, he was still there, still watching me. I moved to a different aisle to stock some items, trying to shake the uncomfortable feeling creeping up my spine. But then, when I looked at the security mirror mounted in the corner, my stomach dropped. The man had moved. He was now 2 aisles closer, and he was still looking directly at me. My hands tightened around the box I was holding. I forced myself to breathe. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he was just waiting for a friend. Or maybe he was waiting for me to be alone. I turned to head toward the stockroom, and that's when I felt it, a hand on my arm. I jumped, spinning around, but it wasn't the man. It was a woman. Tall, blonde, dressed casually, but something about her was off. She had a polished, artificial kind of beauty, like she belonged in an expensive office, not wandering around Walmart at 2 a.m. She was smiling, but not the friendly kind of smile. The kind of smile that felt calculated. "Oh my God, it's been forever," she said loudly, gripping my arm. I frowned. "I think you have the wrong person." Her fingers tightened. Then, in a low whisper, she said something that made my blood run cold. "That man is recording you." I didn't move, didn't turn around, but the woman kept talking, keeping up her fake friendly act. "I can't believe we ran into each other." "How have you been?" she said. Her tone exaggerated, her voice loud, then softer. "He's been watching you for a while. Followed you from the front of the store." A cold, sinking feeling settled in my chest. She tugged my arm gently. "Come on, let's take a walk and catch up." She started leading me away from the cameras, toward the warehouse exit. Everything about this felt wrong. I glanced at the security mirrors again. The man in electronics, he was still there. His phone was raised. He was recording. My breath caught in my throat. Then I noticed something else. He wasn't alone. There was another man at the front entrance, and another near the self-checkout. My pulse spiked. This wasn't just some random stalker. This was coordinated. And the woman? She wasn't helping me. She was part of it. I yanked my arm free. "Let go of me," I shouted, loud enough to echo through the store. A few customers turned. A co-worker looked up. The woman's expression shifted. For the first time, she looked angry. Her eyes darted toward the man in electronics. Then, without a word, she turned and walked away, straight out the warehouse exit. I stood there, heart hammering. When I turned back toward the front, the man in electronics was gone. So were the others. I told my manager what happened. He called security. We checked the cameras. What we saw still haunts me. The woman hadn't come in alone. She had entered with the man from electronics. They had arrived together, split up, waited, and they weren't the only ones. A black SUV had been parked outside for over an hour, waiting, and when the woman left through the warehouse exit, the SUV followed. I called the police. They took a report, but they never found them. And the worst part? A week later, another night shift employee at a different store went missing. She had been seen talking to a blonde woman before she vanished. They found her purse in a ditch, but they never found her. I quit my job a month later. I moved to a different city, but sometimes I still feel watched, like they're still out there, like I was supposed to be next. And every time I walk through a parking lot at night, I wonder what would have happened if I had gone with her. Would I have been taken to the black SUV? Would I have ever been seen again? Or would I have ended up like the other girl, a missing person poster? A case that would never be solved. And the worst part, I know they're still out there, hunting, waiting for their next target.